So to our first news story today. So last week the story broke that a Korean company, Coupang, which is broadly equivalent, I suppose, in that part of the world to Amazon.com as a retail store, had 34 million compromised accounts leaked out. Now, of course, the scope of the leak was fortunately not inclusive of payment data, but nevertheless, a large amount of customer data such as email addresses and indeed things like account history and purchase history was leaked as part of that. To put that into context, 34 million is approximately half the population of South Korea. So we're talking, a very good chunk of compromised accounts. And in fact, it contributes to more than the current number of users. So it must include a fair amount of legacy accounts as well. So let's turn into you first of all, Nathan. What are your sort of reactions, first of all, when you hear that kind of compromise?
I mean, that is a huge amount of data that's been leaked, and you think about what that data is: email addresses, names, phone numbers, and things like that. Whilst there isn't payment information attached to that, you would suspect that off the back of that breach, there may well be some phishing attempts with all of those email addresses that they have. There'll probably be lots of spam messages, depending obviously on who's got that data and where they're selling it and who they're selling it to. But there could well be an increase in spam and phishing as a result of that data breach.
Yeah. And from your perspective, as also as a kind of like a technical person, Nathan, how does that sort of make you feel from kind of like a technical perspective in terms of security and for a retailer of that sort of magnitude as well?
Yeah, I mean, you would. I mean, obviously, nothing is impenetrable. People always seem to find a way through. You would hope, though, that with an organisation that big, that with that much data and information, that it would have been almost impossible to get hold of that much information without somebody spotting it, unless, of course, it was the work of someone inside, which it may well have been, or the result of some kind of inside leak. So in those scenarios, it's almost very hard to mitigate when it's someone on the inside who just wants to act maliciously, But again, as an organisation, we have to ensure that we have procedures in place so that people only have access to things that they need to, and that things are locked down appropriately and in a secure and safe manner.
Yeah, I think on that point, I mean, one of the sort of hypotheses is that it was an inside job and that it was actually an ex-employee who leaked the data. I know one thing that we've done as an organisation recently is go through a process of instituting an information security management system in our organisation.
Yeah.
And I think one of the sort of key sort of parts of that is what we call the offboarding process. And I think, I don't wonder what your thoughts are on that, but whether, perhaps that was where perhaps the weakness in that organisation is a lack of offboarding process in terms of... Yeah,
I mean, if it turns out to be someone who's left the company, then, they need to look at, what they're doing once someone has left. Are they removing their accounts? Are they resetting passwords? A lot of you would hope that they would be using password managers because the passwords for their systems, you would hope would be, of such magnitude and length that you wouldn't be able to remember them. Mm-hmm. But obviously, if someone has remembered a password, even if they don't still have access to that, then you need to be aware that, are your passwords that you use in your organisation memorable enough so that if someone leaves, can they still, access your systems? And if that's the case, then, you should be thinking about rotating those passwords on a regular basis and especially evaluating those policies and passwords at the point when someone leaves.
Yeah. And turn to you, Simon, on this topic. I mean, maybe from a more sort of consumer perspective, how does this make you feel, sort of knowing that there's a breach of this sort of magnitude that's possible to happen, as a sort of someone that might use these services?
So I in joining this world more recently, I found that it's quite scary the more scams that you see happening and the stories you get of personal experiences. Whilst we're in DC, we had someone on stage telling about $1 million that had been taken from her through a scammer over a period of time. And it's just profoundly disturbing when you see how credible this lady was in terms of a professional lady, and seeing how the scammer worked through the systems around her and the various platforms that she was moved on to. So I think my eyes have been opened more in recent days to how these people work. So if you think of it at that sort of scale, and only a small number of those sorts of details being used against people could be very, very harmful.
Yeah, and I think, often the classic association with this kind of data breach is identity theft. So the fact that you've got access to lots of potential identities for then going and registering for, new services or, financial payment services. But I guess the other side of it, particularly the revelation that not only was identity information leaked, but also purchase history, does of course open the opportunity more for scammers. And I think, I don't know if it's something which you've personally encountered in your life, but that sort of scam where someone says, oh, here's you're due a refund for a recent purchase, or we want to ask you some questions about a recent purchase, and they ultimately start to bait you for some details. But I
think you see it, and I've had a couple of things where I've been drawn in, not quite in that way, but just things that were even more believable than that. Yeah. And I think I'm very aware that it's a thin line between credibility of that sort of thing and the falsehood, isn't it? So I even had something yesterday where buying a car, and they texted me in order for me to fill in a form, and you just, after being at the GASA summit in DC, you're like, I'm just going to make sure this is definitely them,
Absolutely. I think it just makes it all the more important for us to be vigilant, doesn't it, when we're sort of interacting, and especially with, I think retail is we're seeing increasingly that it's the most common avenue often for frauds to be executed, is in that sort of area of very timely frauds as well, where things seem to line up, they match something that you're expecting. The home delivery one's another one that's like that. You've had a parcel from Amazon, that kind of scam. Yeah. And for us, particularly as we approach the festive season, being particularly aware of the risks of this. And, sometimes the breaches aren't always publicised. I had to look a little bit for this one, in fact. Yeah. But I think it's happening all the time. And just an awareness of that probably is where it's at.